Hey everybody, I am here with my friend Joe Bilton of Heroic Maps to talk about uh, projects in the past, projects in the future, and all things TTRPGs. Hey Joe, how you doing?
Very good, thanks.
Excellent. We were trying before the show started to remember how long we've known each other. I know 8 to 10 years ago I was running a Fate game for my kids and their friends, and I
Mm,
started using your maps because they were just absolutely gorgeous. And they had just the right amount of detail on them to
mm,
pull things, to let the players pull things from the maps. And I think back then I was printing everything out and
yeah.
gluing it down to foam boards and slicing it. Had a huge stack of those. Um, how did you get started in this?
In maps generally we're coming up to 12 years of making maps now. And it started because of Hero Quest, so the sort of the classic board game.
Yeah.
And what happened was we had picked up a copy of Hero Quest again, like an old. Because I had when I was a kid, I had a copy. I was like 9 or 10 years old, but we bought a new copy, and for like nostalgia reasons, we played it loads and played all the quests. And then because I'm quite a crafty person, I thought, what I'll do, I'll make a custom Hero Quest board out of polystyrene and foam, and sort of paint one like a 3D dungeon. So I spent all this time making this massive like modular Hero Quest board, um, but it was rubbish. It looked rubbish. It was like early days for my crafting skills. So it looked awful. It took up so much space because I tried to scale up the board and everything. So it was impractical. We hardly ever used it. I used it like once, and that was it. Went in the bin. And then Sarah said to me, my wife, who's my Heroic Maps partner, said, well, "Why don't you make maps in Photoshop? Why don't you?" I had some Photoshop skills from like I used to make textures for flight simulators. Why don't you make like custom boards and stuff, and we'll print those off and we can use those instead. So I made a couple of these, and Drive Through was I think Drive Through RPG was only about a year, maybe a year or two old as a website. It was like early days for Drive Through, um, and I had come across it and I thought, well, maybe if I'll put them on sale on Drive Through, and I might make enough money to cover printing a couple of copies myself, just to cover those costs. So I put on these first two maps, and it was called. First one was called Greystone Dungeon 1, and then Greystone Dungeon 2. Right? And they were very much Hero Quest style boards in that they were rectangles that had corridors and rooms with very obvious walls. They had no doors on them, so you could place the doors where you want to. They had no furniture. They were just essentially flagstone dungeon layouts. But they sold quite well. We sold like 10, 15 copies in the first month. And we're like, well, that's something worth doing casually, sort of thing. So then we started to make a few more, and they sold more. Um, and then at the time, I was a science teacher at high school, so like 12 to 18-year-olds, and like as in British high school, not American high school. Which
Right.
who knows what your systems are? I don't. Anyway,
It's a
and so
mystery.
I was teaching this. I was making maps in the evening as a sort of hobby thing. Um, People started liking it more, so we decided to actually have it as a secondary income that I would work on it in the evenings, and sort of come up with some kind of schedule for how we release things. And that's when we came up with our Geomorph range. We started to do things that came away from the Hero Quest board, right? So I think our first maybe like 6 things were like explicitly for Hero Quest, which is where the name Heroic Maps comes from, because it was a play on Hero Quest.
Of course.
And then we deviated away from actually more people are using it for RPGs, and they want to have doors on the maps, and they want to have some furniture on the maps, and those sort of things. So then we moved towards those sort of areas, and it just sort of grew. I was just then working on maps all the time, and then about 6 or 7 years ago, I went full time making maps. So I stopped teaching, and I just now make maps all day long, every day. So I think I'm up to. I think I think I'm probably around maybe like 1,800 maps
Wow.
in the time, which is a huge number of maps. But,
Well,
yeah.
they are hands down my favorite battle maps. Anyone does. I love the level of detail. You know, when we were playing Fate, Fate had
Mm.
that thing where you assign aspects to an environment, and then people can they can invoke those aspects to do things.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
And so, rather than having to sit down and label like, okay, it's a dark room, it's fog, it's slippery floor, it's you know, there's furniture that could be broken. I would just tell the players to look at the map, and if it's on the
Mm.
map, you can invoke it as an
Then it's part of
aspect.
it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, then it's part of the game, and if you don't notice it, too bad. But if you notice it, then you can, whatever it is, you can pull it out, and
Mm.
that really worked really well with Fate. And then my own, I think, you know, just my own players were growing up and they'd heard about Dungeons and Dragons, and they would always ask me like, how much gold do we get? How much gold do we get? And I'm like, it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter in Fate how much gold you get, you know? And so
Mm.
we transitioned to playing Dungeons and Dragons, and I have this superpower slash annoying trait, which is if I really like what somebody's doing, I have to know who they are. I have to get in touch with them. I
Mm.
can't just be a passive consumer. So I think that's when I
Right. Yeah.
started talking to you and going, I need to make this kind of map and I need to make that kind of map.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when the pandemic hit, that's when I started
Mm.
making the first actual product. And there was just no
Yeah.
questions asked that I wanted to use your work in it, because what you guys do
Mm.
is just absolutely fantastic.
Mm.
So that was 5 years ago we've been doing this, and
Mm.
across, I think, 11 projects,
Yeah.
and,
I think. Yeah. I think I've got a folder. I have a folder on my laptop, which is it's just called Lou. So it's
I
all
was
the
gonna
things.
ask, was it called Thrones and Bones, or was it called Lou?
No, 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 no. It's just called Lou. And so I have all the folders in there of all the sort of like core templates I've done. I think I was looking the other day, and I think there's like 70, maybe 70 or 80 map files, and some of those will be like 2 levels of the same building sort of thing. But like I think it's about 70 or 80 things, because we've done huge numbers of maps. The first Norengard RPG book had like 15 maps, 20
Yep,
maps. It was
I think so, yeah,
There was loads, because
and
all the stuff in Bents and all the interiors for Stolky's Hall and those sort of things and stuff. And yeah, it was good. What was nice though was that's why I like working with other people and new things, is that it makes me tackle areas and themes and genres and things that either I hadn't thought of myself, or I had avoided because like, wow, that seems a bit tricky. I'm in the mood for something easier today. I'll do an easier thing. But it's actually quite good to be made to do harder things. To challenge yourself with those things, right? So when like someone comes to you with here's my idea, here's my adventure, and I've come up with this weird. Like, I'll tell you one I really liked was the troll, the huge troll
oh,
with
yes.
the crashed Carvey on its back, right, stomping around, crushing the cities and things, right? And that's really cool, and that still stands out as a map I really like, even though it's years ago now. But that was that's quite a unique map, right? So it's on the view of this. You're on the back of this giant troll, and its head and the little rocks, and then down below is the blurred city far below. And that was a conception. I wouldn't have thought of that map, right? I wouldn't have already thought of putting a crashed airship, wasn't it? It was like
I
the
think it's
Harvey
just a
flying
regular
ship.
I think it's just a regular, ship that it's wearing like a hat, and
Okay,
then
yeah, so there's only third, right?
the
And then the goblins
players
are using it
are in
as
an
steering wheel
airship.
with it.
Spoiler. The players are in an airship flying up to
Oh
it
yeah,
to fight the
that's right.
goblins, to fight the
Who were like
trolls
using
in
the
the
helm to control
yes.
it, right? Yeah, and that was really cool. And that I like that map. So that was one that I wouldn't have thought of myself. And if I had thought about doing like a big mounted thing, I might have. Wow, that sounds a bit tricky. But working with other people who have come up with ideas and things, it's quite refreshing to push myself to try different things, and that just makes me a more rounded artist, so I can you know
And
work on more things in the future.
it's completely a two-way street, because I think the very first thing we did together, which was the second thing we did together, the second adventure in the core book, where they go
Mm.
to the dwarven hold, and the dwarves have tunneled
Yes,
through to the old
Ringborg.
hold.
Yeah.
Yep. So I remember in the final, there's three maps in that, and the third
Mm.
map in Ringborg, I had sent you a list of rooms, and you decided there weren't enough, and added maybe four more chambers.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
okay, have to put something here now. Can't have empty rooms. And
Yeah. No,
but I
I
like,
like Ringborg. Ringborg was really fun. I like the entrance, which has that ramp up to the big dwarven face
yep,
by the harbour. And then you have these three generations of the hold, right? You got the fresh, brand new areas and stuff, and then the older bit, and then the proper, like
yep.
abandoned and going through to the caverns and things. So it was a fun map, and I had done some dwarven things before. I had done what's it called? Trostenhall. That's what it's called. It's a set of four dwarven like ruins, like sort of like coal ruins. And then I did a really big dwarven set called, I forgot what it's called now. It's like 9 square maps that fit together into a dwarven whole. Like, forgetting it because I made this one about 10 years ago, like 9 years ago, but something dwarven whole. Oh, Valdisfjell, that's it. Right, Valdisfjell, which is another dwarven thing. And so I was sort of getting into the swing of dwarven things. But then to do this massive, huge 3-level dwarven hold, with ruined areas and active. Ruins are always easier. I think ruins are an easier thing to map, right? Because it's very easy to put in the rubble and the sort of damage and cobwebs and dust and things, and that's quick to put in, and it fills space and it looks cool and everything. And it's much more work to then do a living place, because you have to think about what are these rooms, like who is living here, and how would they decorate it in a functional way, but also one that clearly works as a map and shows the sort of culture that you're trying to go across. What would a dwarven bed look like? How would it be different to an elven bed, and those sort of things? And so with a ruin, you can skip those things out because they've been destroyed or they're smashed or they're gone or whatever sort of thing. But in a functional place where people are still living, you have to think differently. So because Trostenhall was this ruined dwarven thing, then doing Ringborg for your adventure was quite good to think, actually, how would they have it? And you had, it wasn't just then free reign for me making up. You had said, okay, they've got the temple with this rune path that you have to go around as part of the sort of prayer ritual, and this big brewery with this sleeping rooms and all sort of things, right? So I had all those features, and it was, I did enjoy that. That was a good project.
And Ringboard was unique in that it was a mine that they had bought and were converting into a hold, and then they'd found an old hold below it. So you did a wonderful job of showing that they had some of the rooms were still roughed out and some were more polished because they were still converting it.
Yeah. There were some dead end tunnels and things that showed where they were excavating or enlarging chambers and things. So,
but there were
I think
there were also walls that were still rough tunnel walls and other walls where they'd come in and polished them up and
and it's quite fun to sort of tell the story there of a location, right? So that when the GM or the player looks at the map, they get a sense of what the place is and the story of the place, and that can be inspiring for for how people then use the map.
Is there something you haven't mapped yet that you want to?
I mean, I do want to map more sort of more um, modern, like near modern things, right? So
Yeah,
a lot
I
of
don't think
people.
I can help you there.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think I can help you
No,
there.
I'm not sure. But like, so people often ask me about, doing things like superhero games and sort of like near modern sci-fi things. And the most I've done with that is like zombie apocalypse
Hmm.
maps.
Hmm.
Um, but the main reason holding me back with it is the amount of asset I need to produce. So because like modern buildings are packed full of stuff. Like a medieval castle could legitimately have in a room could have like a chest, and that's everything the person had. Right? They had a bed in the chest, and they keep their limited possessions in the chest. They're lucky they got a shelf; they can keep their one book on it. Right, so like it's realistic to have sparse rooms. Modern houses and modern buildings and rooms are packed full of things. Every single surface is covered in things. Shelves are covered in things. There's equipment and machine. Like it's a very different thing. Um, so whereas doing fantasy things, I can reuse some assets. I've got a chest. I've made a chest before. I use this chest in this one here. With the modern things, I'd have to start essentially from scratch and create a huge number of assets for um, for an area, even a simple thing. So it's mainly. I think the main issue is there's so many projects competing in my head for time that
Hmm.
when I'm thinking, well, I could work on this and I could have this map produced today or tomorrow and out for people, and people are waiting for the next map for this D&D adventure, or I could work on these assets, but I'll be working on these for like 2-3 weeks to get everything before I even start the map properly. Um, so I'm always weighing up that sort of balance, and normally what wins is okay. I'll put that off for now and work on something else. Um, so yeah, so I know that there's the long term gain is good that I end up with those assets, and that's why with the zombie apocalypse things, that's kind of baby steps towards that, because
Hmm.
that's the ruin. As I was saying earlier about the fact that with ruins you need to have less stuff, right? So doing a ruined interior of a zombie apocalypse house, you do some of the furniture, not all of the furniture, because it's been used for a barricade or bashed around a zombie's head. Um, and so you can use less stuff. But then I have got those assets now, so I'm slowly piecemeal creating assets, but not as a sit down and do it all in one go thing.
It seems like another baby step might be rooftops for
Yeah,
certainly
yeah,
for.
I did that. Yeah, I did. Yeah, people are keen. I know they're keen for like suburban streets and things, and you
Yep.
can get away with that. But what always happens is I do that. I do rooftop maps, and then people will say, "Oh, I'd love to have interiors for this,"
Yep.
and I go, "Yeah, okay, I'll try and do interiors." But
But
and
that's a
so
70-floor skyscraper.
yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, I did a cyberpunk. We have a range called the New Atami range, which is our cyberpunk
Hmm.
setting, and we did an apartment block as a Patreon mega map. So the Patreon mega maps are ones that we do. We sort of pick a new topic every 6 months or so, and then each month we work on part of that thing. And so in this case, it was like a 6 or 7 story cyberpunk skyscraper apartment block sort of thing, and that had a lot of floors. And I made a lot of the furniture I made for that is useful for modern things, because cyberpunk basically is modern things with neon lights. That's
Right.
the that's how you make it a bit rainy outside, and you put
Graphed on a
neon light.
couple buttons or.
Yeah. You put
Yep.
a little bit of tech. Right? You put a bit of
Yep.
tech to show that it's a bit more advanced, but it's always has a modern aesthetic to it. So um, that was a lot of work though. That was a lot of work, because each floor had you know 7 or 8 bedrooms on it, and the bedrooms had to be interesting enough to be telling a story. So one of the bedrooms we had like hacker, the classic hacker room in one of the back rooms and things, another room been a murder, so there was the chalk outline on the floor and stuff. So so you could use it for sort of crime games. So yeah.
Nice. I'm eventually gonna run a Star Trek Adventures campaign, and then I'm gonna
Oh, nice.
dive into your fabulous sci-fi maps and probably have suggestions for new ones.
Yeah. Well, that's always good though. That's always useful because so we don't play um all of our RPG games we play as a family and things are fantasy ones, right? So
Mhm.
um and so with the sci-fi areas and those sort of areas that we're not playing, we don't always know what would be useful for the players, right? So so our GM's crying out for a particular sort of setting or location or things that go with in their setting, and we can guess at things because obviously there's like tropes and core ideas and things, but there'll be some topics, some areas, some map ideas that will not occur to us because unless you're playing those particular games, those particular rules, you don't know that those things are important to that game. So we always appreciate when people either email us or contact us on social media or a Patreon of us and say, "Oh, look, I'm playing this sci-fi game. It'd be really useful if we had a whatever sort of thing." Um, so that is
It
useful. So
Yeah, I think for Star Trek, I think just a lot of those kind of original series era, red soil planets with a couple rocks,
mm,
and some weird
yeah, yeah.
plants would be
Some
useful.
away missions. Yeah,
Exactly. For the next generation, all you need is a screenshot of the Los Angeles National Forest. But but for the original series, back when they would make those weirdly colored sets, that would be great.
mm, mm,
It'd be hysterical to. I don't know if it's I don't know if there's a image protection, but it'd be hysterical to use Vasquez rocks in something.
mm.
An aerial view of Vasquez rocks since it's in like 6 episodes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yep. Um, Aside, I went out there once and I climbed the rock and got home and turned on the TV and found out there was a shooting at the bottom of the rock while I was on the top. But
Ooh,
it missed me.
lucky you
And
at the right
yeah,
side of the rock there.
yeah, and I didn't know the Batcave was there too. I wish I had known. I would have gone to the Batcave and where Kirk fought the Gorn. Um, how did you get into role playing games in general? What's your TTRPG origin story?
Well, essentially, it's like an offshoot of doing the Hero Quest things and finding that Hero Quest um, wasn't hitting the. Like we essentially we played Hero Quest, um, and you play it as it is, and there's not that much of an RPG aspect to it. But when we started to play the expansions to it, we liked the idea of continuing your character and we started to then try and talk about like downtime ideas for things. So we say, okay, what's happening to the characters in between? And we're like, well, why don't we just try? Why don't we play an RPG? So our first one was Pathfinder. So we picked up Pathfinder, um, and really enjoyed it. And I'm the forever GM in the family, and so I sort of run the game. So I picked up Pathfinder, I learned the rules, and I was like, this is easy. And I'm quite I always play quite rules light with things anyway. So um, I'm not like a rules lawyer about things. I want the story to flow and I want people to enjoy the game and stuff. So I hand wave things or ignore things that don't need to really impact on things. So I learnt the rules enough that we could play a game with it, and uh, we ran. We had about 3 or 4 campaigns, like family campaigns. Um, Maybe at most we had 6 players. We used to have a nephew and niece coming over, and like 2 brothers-in-law, and Sarah and me, and someone else. We played the games, and we tried a few adventure paths, and they were quite fun. But the issue with that for me was that I didn't have the maps for those
Hmm.
adventures, and they didn't have the community content sort of thing back then. So I was like, well, I'd rather write adventures that I have maps for. So I have maps that I already made, or I make them for the adventures, and I write the adventures and things. And problem was though I was quite inexperienced still with it, so the adventures sometimes petered out because were a bit rubbish, and so we didn't really know where they were going sometimes, and it didn't quite work out. But then 5e was sort of making more of a it came out and was more public, and so we thought, well, let's try 5e, and we preferred that. We actually enjoyed that more than Pathfinder, and so we switched over. So we still have what was nice with us. It was during the when all the lockdown pandemic things happened, and our in-person games had to stop because of national lockdowns in the UK. So that all stopped. So it switched to being online VTT games. But what was really good was, at the same time, my dad and my brother, who had never played any RPGs at all, were now also, with this lockdown, weren't coming around and weren't seeing each other. And so I said, well, look, why don't we start a D&D campaign? Right? Why don't we play that together? And they were like, okay, well, what's it about? We don't know what it is. So we've now actually, I've played with them every week now since 2020. All right. So every Monday we have a game with dad and brother on Foundry, and it's brilliant. So they've done 4 or 5 of like my own written campaigns. They had one where they were pirates, which was really good fun. They were like marooned pirates who ended up becoming like rich pirates, and they had one where they entirely failed to save the dwarven hold. It was really good. It was quite fun. The story was that they were the descendants of these, what they call, I call them like shard keepers or something. So the story was that this dwarven hold had this crystal, this shard, which powered some kind of arcane machine, right? And it had always been there, and no one really knew, apart from the king, no one really knew what it did. They knew it was there and it was important. And every 500 years, the shard needs to be taken to a sacred temple and recharged. And so the descendants of these shard keepers ended up being my dad and brother's character. Right? So they were like, oh, got to go right now. And then the king told them that the reason they have to go is actually it powers a machine that keeps this elemental trapped under the city. And if it fails, that's bad news for the city, right? And so they had like a timeline, like a deadline of how long they had to get to this place and get back. So they went, right, with the important news that this is a timed thing. You need to make good pace to get there. But they got distracted by an NPC, and it was a throwaway NPC. And I just made up some guy, right? And they thought it was intriguing, and they wanted to follow this guy. And I was like, well, I will warn you again. This is the crystal needs to get back before. Oh no, we're going to go and we're going to follow this guy. So they follow this guy, and I left clues that the guy was a werewolf. And they ignored the clues that he was a werewolf. And I was basically saying, this guy's a werewolf. He's taking you to a werewolf den. And they're like, no, that's cool. Okay. So they went there, and they got in a fight with the werewolves, which I had signposted very clearly, and were killed. Right now, I normally am like, I'll pull back the punches if they're going to get killed because I want them to enjoy the game, right? But they deserved it because
totally
they had done this, right? So then what was fun was the next campaign we did started the next week. They were in this post-apocalyptic world, right? Like a fantasy one, but and the legend was that 1,000 years ago, this elemental burst from the ground, destroyed this dwarven hold, rampaged across the kingdom, and now the kingdom is this shattered place, right? And they liked the fact that it was their characters previously that had messed up and allowed this to happen, and now their new characters were living in this world that was shaped by previous characters' failure. Right? So that was really good fun. That was a really fun adventure. And then since then, we've been playing Spandalva and Below, the official D&D game, and we're about 2/3 of the way through, roughly. But they're very methodical players, so they speak to everyone and they go to every place, and they, so it's taking a long time, but they're really enjoying it. They're loving it. And just on Monday, yesterday, yeah, my dad said to me, he said, "Is this the same adventure that had the red cloaks in Fandon. And I said, yes, it's the same adventure. And I was like, we've been playing this for like a month. How is so it was like, he had sort of lost track of how big an adventure, and how many sessions we'd done. So that was good. Yeah.
I'm so jealous that you got your father to play. I couldn't interest
Mm.
mine when he was alive in any of this. Um, that must be wonderful. I played with my
Yeah, it's really nice.
nephews, and I played with my younger nephews, and then younger nephew and my kids, and then my older nephew, who's an adult, who's married, would watch and just kept begging to be allowed to play. And I said, "This is a kids only
Mm,
game. This is a kids only game." I finally let him in, and he's a fantastic player, and has
mm.
actually written material for me now too, because he's also brilliant. But and then of course you do, in addition to role playing, you do very tactile wargaming.
Mm.
Not
Yeah, I
with
do.
digital maps.
No, I do very, very, very physical World War II historical wargaming, and I make a huge amount of 3D terrain, like out of polystyrene and MDF and those sort of things and stuff, like huge amounts of it, which is great. And I got into that about 5 or 6 years ago, just before lockdown sort of kicked in. And that was because when I was a teenager, I mean, I've always been interested in RPGs and also military history. And when I was a teenager, I used to make airfix model kits and things, and model tanks and things. And then I didn't for years. I stopped for years and years. And then I found myself thinking, oh, maybe I should get back into that. It's quite fun to make models. And I stumbled across then um, YouTube videos of World War II historical war games, like bolt action and things. And I was like, oh, that's quite fun because it's using the models, also playing with the models. I could, so I bought a starter set of that and just like fell headlong into it. So now I organise a war game show in my county, which is like it's one of the biggest ones, one of the biggest like small war game days that in the country. So we have like 80 or 90 people turn up on a day, and there'll be 15 people running tables and running, like providing the minis and the terrain and the games and everything. It's really good. And I go to like big war game shows and put on big public tables people can come along and play at. So I ran a table. There's an event in the UK called Salute, which is possibly Europe's biggest war game show. It's not. I think it's the biggest. If not, it's the second biggest. It's a really big show in London, and I was running a game there, a World War II tank battle game, and I had a 15-foot table, 15-foot table of Caen in Normandy, in ruins with a scratch-built cathedral and everything and stuff. And it was an 8-player game, so I had all day long. I had people playing this game, and it's quite a pickup game. So you can sort of come along, play for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and when your tank gets destroyed, off you can go. You're not committed for hours and things. And I think we got through maybe like 90 to 100 players in the day. It was like non-stop, right? And what was really lovely was about a third of the players were kids, right? So and they loved it, and they were really excited. And as you said about kids playing like D&D and things, I was really impressed with how creative the kids were with their approach to the game. They thought of things totally differently, and they focused on different things to the way adults play it, and that was really good to see. I really enjoyed that. So yeah. So,
It at one point my daughter was leading the party, and there were people in their late 20s in the game too, and she
mm,
was, I think, one in their early 30s, and they all defaulted to what she thought we should do, because
yeah,
I said she was like 12 at the time, or 13, but she
yeah,
had the best idea. After she had pushed them in a direction 3 times and they had failed to listen and paid for it, they just elected her party leader and did whatever she thought they should do, and it
nice.
worked out really well.
Yeah, that's good. I
Yeah.
used to when I taught still. I organised a an RPG war games club at school. So I managed to persuade the head teacher to donate some funds to pay for, like some starter sets of
Yeah.
D&D starter sets and dice and some minis and things. And at its height, we had maybe 30 or 40 kids would come along, and it was great. So we had, part of the room, kids would be playing, Warhammer or similar, and then there was always 3 or 4 games of D&D or something
Yep.
similar going on, right? And it was lovely. So you'd see, I would run one of the games for a few of the kids, but you'd see these kids turn up to be the GMs for their friends, and the prep they go into it. They'd be doing the voices, and they'd have made maps, or they'd draw maps out on a whiteboard or whatever, right? They were like so creative with it, and I was actually, because British schools are funny about funding and everything and stuff, but I was able to get more funding because I could sort of say, look how much literacy and maths the kids are developing, right? So these kids are telling stories to their friends, like they are, and these kids are going away and they are writing of their own free will. They're writing stories and plots and things for their friends, right? And then they're responding dynamically to what the friends are saying with the plot to develop the plot more. Now that is a good skill, right? And they're rolling dice and doing calculations, and the kids who are the war gamers are, working out what's the most efficient use of these weapons on this vehicle and what dice rolls we get in the back, all that sort of stuff going on, right? So let alone the social and the fun side of things, it was very educational. So I was able to get more funding for it to expand it and buy some more starter sets and things. So that was good fun, and it was always nice to see how kids approach RPGs.
I wish more schools understood that. I ran a 2-week writing and gaming course and a summer course one time, and it was 2 hours of writing instruction and 2 hours of gaming, with the writing and the gaming reinforcing each other, and it worked really, really well. Found out I'm not a teacher, haven't repeated that course, but but I'm glad I did it once. So how do you and Sarah split the duties up at work?
Well, I do all of the actual artwork things, and Sarah is, well. So in terms of like coming up with the ideas for the maps, that's a joint thing. So we sort of sit down and we brainstorm. Start of the month, we brainstorm together. What would be a useful map, interesting map? What would be a thing that expands an existing range? What features would the map want to have, and those sort of things. So we'll have like a joint meeting on those things. Way back when we first started, Sarah used to draw the maps on paper first. So she would, we sort of sit down and she would plan out the maps on paper, and then I would transfer them into Photoshop and text them things. But as our kids got older, and our kids are both homeschooled, and so as they got older, more of Sarah's time was going towards that sort of stuff. So then the drawing of the maps went to me as well. But Sarah's big thing now still is that she writes all the adventures. So whenever we do so we used to, with our Patreon, we used to have these GM supplements, which were like sort of like 3 or 4 page resources to go with certain apps. And then when we do certain D&D adventures, we write a resource pack to go with those maps, and that will have new plots, or it will have new characters, or roll tables with recipes or menus or things to find and stuff. And Sarah is an amazing writer. She's got an amazing flair with her writing, and like a real creativity. I love it. Whenever I read her stuff, this is brilliant. I love it. So great. And so when we have adventures for those things, she writes that stuff there. So it's the split basically is admin things is split. Writing is nearly all Sarah, but all the artwork is me now.
And so you just put out your first adventure on DM's Guild, and also done your first Kickstarter.
Yeah, we did. So the adventure was inspired by like a writing prompt that DM's Guild were running. It was called like Beyond the Adventure or something. The idea was that you took a D&D or adventure that existed as a starter story, and then you imagined what the next thing was for that for that story. So we picked. There's a Vecna one shot called Nest of the Eldritch Eye, which can be used as a sort of very prequel to the Vecna Eve of Ruin story, because it's like you're level 1 characters, but in Vecna Eve of Ruin you're level 10. So it's just the setup that there's a guy called Vecna who's really bad. But we did that. We liked that little story, so we wrote a follow-on to that, which was called Secrets of the Dead, and we sort of imagined. I won't ruin it, the story, by people telling you how the first one ends. But anyway, it was a follow-on from that story, and that was actually really fun. That was our first full adventure that isn't just a supplement or like a DM's guide thing. It was an intact adventure, a whole adventure, and we made 3 or 4 maps with it, and that was really good fun. That was really enjoyable. Our Kickstarter was our first Kickstarter, which finished back in January, I think, and has been fulfilled. It's all been sent out. Was to do with the Bastion rules that Wizards released to do with in their new Dungeon Master's Guide. So bastions being these strongholds that you can build up, and depending on the level of the party, you can have different rooms, different buildings in your facility. So what we did was essentially a modular tile set of every single type of room that the rules say you can have, at the sizes the rules say you can have the sizes at, and then a whole set of corridors, and and then we did other things like stretch goals where like landscape to put them into, and defensive walls to put around the whole thing, and it was great. We were so pleased that it funded really well, like 240% funded sort of thing, and everyone was very happy with what they got and everything. So that was really good. So it was quite reassuring that our first Kickstarter did all right and people were pleased with it. And we also deliberately didn't make it too much in one go. We didn't want to end up promising too many things and then being stuck having to deliver a huge amount of things. So we could have added more stretch goals. We could have thought of more things to go with it. We had a core idea of we want the core thing to exist is a full set of tiles for this Bastion rule set. And if we can make an alternative version with different sort of textures, that'd be great. And if we can make some backgrounds, that's great. But that's enough, right? That's enough of a thing. So we then could make sure that we didn't end up no one wants to wait for months and months and months overdue waiting for their Kickstarter thing to come through. We'd rather do a finite Kickstarter, have it fun and fulfilled, and then think about future things. So that's what we did. So it's good. That was really good.
I recall it funded. I mean, it fulfilled really, really quickly, and also even with what you said, it was an enormous amount of material. I kept for a couple of weeks there. I kept coming home and saying, "Oh, I've got another free download from another download. I can't wait to use it too."
So there was the core set, which was all the rooms in a castle sort of appearance with flagstone floors and things, and we added 10 bonus rooms that were not part of the rules, but the backers voted for these 10 types of rooms. And there was corridors. That was the core set. We managed to do an alternative set of that, which was like townhouse themed. So it was warmer and it had nice wooden floors as opposed to being a cold castle. And that was then all the versions of those things in that. There was a whole set of modular walls and towers and things to go around to build it. There was 13 different landscapes to put your bastion into. Oh, and then we did a bunch of pre-builds of like a castle example at level 5, level 7, 9, and 13, or whatever the balance is, right? So we said, okay, look, imagine you're a castle. What would be good rooms for level 5? Okay, so we built a castle with a landscape. And then over the next few levels, the castle expanded. the landscape changed with it. So trees got chopped down so that you could expand the walls, and one little house that was near the castle became a little village because people were, moved as it grew into a defensive castle. People moved there to be near that castle. So there was the landscape grew along with it. So that was pretty fun to do and sort of think, how would this landscape change if someone's now building this big castle? So we put in new paths and stuff. People are going to use this gate, so there'll be a path now going off through the woods that wasn't there before. They got to cut down these trees because it's blocking the line of sight from the towers, and so that was pretty fun to do. So yeah, so I think we ended up with maybe 8 or 9 products from that, and they went on the Kickstarter, on the drive-through for people who hadn't backed it to pick up if they wanted to. But yeah, that was good fun. So we have got plans for another Kickstarter later on this year. We're quite keen to do a modular village set.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so we did a village a long time ago, modular village a long time ago, called Modular Streets and Houses, I think, and it was.
I have that.
Yeah, it must be like 9 years old, maybe 10 years old now. But like my artwork has come on a lot in the years in between, and I've got ideas for making a set that would let you build really big villages on a granular scale, but also quite quickly because there'd be sort of pre-built blocks. So it might be the case that you have, okay, I haven't worked out the size exactly. Let's say the smallest is a 6x6 square, right? So okay, this has got one house on it. The 6x6 is one house or one garden, one whatever. So if you want to have the fine control of placing every house at a time, you can. There you go. Have all the houses separately. Or if you want to build things quicker, here are some 12x12s and some 24x24s with pre-built layouts that you can't build just by individual houses that look more natural. So you could do a mix. You could say, all right, I'm going to put down 2 of these big ones as a starter, and I also want to have a house over here, so I can then use the small tiles to put a small house over there and stuff. So that's the sort of fledgling idea that we've got as a starting point. And the goal would be that we would focus on that first. We might have a stretch goal, have like a winter version or something, and obviously that could lead to a town version in the future. But we wouldn't want to make it too much of a too big in one go. So be able to then be able to fulfill on time. That's more important to us than making it a massive project. There's always a chance to do future ones. So yeah, that's a thing we've got as a sort of semi-nebulous idea for later on in the year.
Sounds brilliant. It sounds really, really nice. And also something I'll be backing. Speaking of massive projects, I think with the upcoming with the Fury of the Forsaken, we have exceeded the number of maps we've ever put into a project.
Yeah, I think it's huge, right?
Yep. I think it's 20 separate locations with something like I have this written down elsewhere, but I think it's 160 variations.
Right. There's a lot.
Not counting or it's 128 variations, not counting day night. I mean, sorry, not counting gridded and ungridded, because everything is gridded and ungridded, but just counting day night, interior, exterior, and the normal and during the battle, spoiler, the final battle, I think it was 128 variations.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Like the Freckerheim stuff was when I was saving it all, I had to make a list of like all the permutations to make sure I was saving all the possible things. Okay, here it is, interior with a grid at night. Here it is, interior with a grid in the day. Interior with a grid. No, like every possible combination of those things. It was so I sort of saved some time with the Freckerheim thing because I was able to work on maybe like 4 of them at the same time on the same canvas. So back when I first started making maps, my laptop that I used wasn't very powerful. It was all right, but it wasn't great. And so it used to struggle when I used to do like a 30 by 30 square map. My laptop used to struggle, and if I had 60 or 70 layers on there. I mean, sometimes you press save on it, and it would take like an hour to save. You'd either spend the whole time like, is it going to crash? Am I going to lose everything? So um, I then upgraded the laptop over time, sort of thing. So my laptop now is a really good one that's really geared towards like high demand Photoshop work. So it's got huge amounts of RAM, and it's a really good GPU. So it's really good for those things. So what I can do now is I can make a really big canvas, and I can then place in that canvas basically like the placeholders for where those maps, so the shape of those maps and things, and then work on those maps, 4 or 5 maps simultaneously. So if they're all in the same location, and they're going to be sharing color palettes and texture packs and those sort of things, I can apply it to lots of things at the same time, right? So
Nice.
yeah, it speeds things up. When I'm doing, so Frackerheim has, you've got the market, and you've got then 2 areas by the wharfs and things, and you've got the bit that's just at the side of the longhouse, and all those other areas on that bit. So they were all on the same main canvas, chopped up into, I have like dividing lines, so I can, okay, this is the boundary for this map, and those sort of things. But then I can then in one go, right, I've got to do all the pillars, the sort of supporting pillars that go around holding up all the platforms. I can do that on every single map. I can go along, same brush open now, go along and do all those bits. Now I'm doing the shading on them. Okay, I'll go and shade. I'll get the shading brush on. There's a really slow thing in Photoshop, like a real time consuming thing, is to be switching brushes, right? So you get the right texture, you put the right opacity on the brush and the size of the brush, and it's perfect. You do the things with it, and then you have to switch it to a new thing. So you switch the brush, change the texture, and all those little things add up. It takes 15, 20 seconds to change the brush, but if you're changing the brush 100 times, that adds up to a block of time that just slows it all down. So if I can go, right, I'm going to do all the shading on these 4 maps at the same time, and get the shading brush up and do all the shading for it, that ends up being more efficient for me long term. That's the thing, and I can do that because the laptop's good. I couldn't do that on my old laptop. I had to, that was impossible. But so I was working on working on a field at the time, and then once I've got the core maps, I always start, when I'm doing variation, I always start with the day map. That's the default one, because that's the default colors. So I created all 4 of those first locations, in day versions, and with the snow and things, and that lets me balance the colors properly and balance the sort of tones of the shades and things. And then I go, right, now to the night versions, and so then I apply the right color filters and balances and things to shift things to night, and certain contrasts have to bump up because the way night, the way you sort of view night and things. And also, obviously, you're viewing night in a map and not like reality. If really a map at night would be rubbish, it'd be all black, right? That wouldn't be a very fun. That wouldn't be a very fun map, right? It'd be quick to do. Here you go. Here's the night version. It's all black, right? But so you have to sort of think about, how you convey night, and that's a mixture of desaturation, also putting in colors of like moonlight sort of tones, and then lighting of torches and braziers and those sort of things, and how shadows change with those things. So do all those things, and then I go, right, now the battle version. So I'll do all these layering up the version things, and then I can keep them all as separate folders in Photoshop, within the Photoshop layers tab, so I can switch on and switch off the night, and switch on and switch off the fire, and those sort of things.
Nice.
So then when I'm processing it, I have to go, right, okay, so day version. So I turn off all the folders that are tagged at night or balanced up, right? Day, save that. Now put the grid on. Now save it. Now put interiors on. Now save it. Now tears off, and then now put the night on and do all the same things
Yep.
all the way through. So what I didn't count how many maps there were. I'm aware through the process that there was a lot of maps.
I think it's 256 right now, counting all the variations, inclinging gridded
that's
and
crazy.
ungridded.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
So
it's a good set. It's actually a really, it's a really fun set. It's got forests and it's got troll caves and it's got this town, which is always going to be useful. Like people, whatever they're playing, will find inspiration in a snowy lake town setting.
And it has houses. A village. It has a small village too.
Yes, yeah. The village is nice. I like the village, and it's got barrows and it's got a sunken ship and everything, and then it's got these
long ships.
Burial island, and the long ships. Yeah, so it's a pretty diverse package in terms of things. What sort of things you get with it. So it was fun to do. I did really enjoy it.
Yeah, and I think the replayability of the setting is so richly detailed that I think you could make it a home base for the characters. Either the village or the town could be a home base to operate out of for a much bigger campaign. Not that this isn't a huge adventure in its own right. Yep. We are coming up on an hour, so I guess we should call it. This has been awesome. Is there? Can you tell us where people can find Heroic Maps?
Well, you could look on our site, heroicmaps.com, but it's not very updated. So the best place to find us is on DriveThruRPG. So we're listed on DriveThruRPG, Heroic Maps. We have 1,600 maps listed there. Or you can find us on DM's Guild just by searching Heroic Maps, and we have lots of maps there. We're also on Roll20 as Heroic Maps. And we have a Patreon, which is also Heroic Maps. So easy to find there. Our Patreon, we have every month for like a flat rate. We're not like charging per creation. For a flat rate, you get 7 to 11 maps depending on what tier you're on with it every month. So that's a bonus. That's a bargain. Come along to our Patreon.
It's fantastic. I'm a subscriber, and again, the amount of maps you get every month is phenomenal. All right. Thank you, Joe. And I'm looking forward to the maps we still have to come.
Yes, me too. Good chatting.
You too.